This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: more weapons, more support. NATO offers concrete security assurances to Ukraine, but no precise timeline to membership. China accuses NATO of stirring up tension in Asia and warns the alliance against expansion in the region. Our other headlines: Thailand's electoral authority calls for the Prime Minister frontrunner to be disqualified a day before the key leadership vote. And the world's first methane-powered rocket heads into orbit after launching in China. NATO is standing by its commitment to supply long-term aid to Ukraine and will offer fast-track membership when the conditions are right. Speaking alongside President Zelensky at the summit in Vilnius, NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg said the supply of weapons remains the most urgent task. He also said Ukraine is closer to NATO than ever before and that its accession process will be shortened, but he offered no timeline. At the summit, G7 countries have announced a framework for security assurances for Ukraine. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Beaver, in Vilnius. John, President Zelensky seeming to be using rather calmer language today in his tweets, but I guess this still falls rather short of the hoped-for timetable he wanted for membership. What is it that Ukraine wants?
Yeah, definitely you're right to point out that that language was calmer. This was seemingly a more reflexive, more relaxed Volodymyr Zelensky than the one we heard from yesterday, who was heavily critical that NATO weren't providing this timeline for Ukrainian entry into NATO, which is what Ukraine wanted. They wanted some clear ideas about when they were going to be able to get into NATO. He said in a press conference earlier that he understood why some in NATO were hesitant about that being too soon, because in his words, he said, of course, everyone is trying to avoid a world war, nobody looking to antagonize Russia further than that. So yes, that topic of conversation has continued to dominate things here. And what we have been hearing a lot about as well, as you mentioned, this G7 support for Ukraine. We've also had what's called the NATO-Ukraine Council, where Ukraine can meet as equals, where they can do things like discuss matters, and Ukraine can convene that council. So these are greater powers bringing Ukraine closer into NATO, but stopping short of saying when they can actually join.
There is no risk-free option, for NATO allies either. But the biggest risk is if President Putin wins, because then the message is that when he uses military force, when he violates international law, when he invades a neighbor, then he gets what he wants. And that's exactly why it is so important for NATO allies to support Ukraine.
Germany and the UK are among the countries to pledge more weapons at this summit in Vilnius. What exactly is on offer?
Yeah, there is a long list of everything that's been promised. The UK is providing 70 combat and logistical vehicles, thousands of rounds of Challenger 2 ammunition, somewhere in the region of £50 million worth as a support contract for things like battlefield repairs. Germany has promised 2 Patriot missile launchers, which Ukraine has long said they need more of those to help repel the Russian threat. Some missiles with that system as well, tanks and armoured vehicles. The lists go on and on. Interestingly as well, some comments made by UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. He said in response to Ukraine asking for more weapons and supplies last year, he apparently said, we're not Amazon, and he thought that Ukraine maybe needed to show a bit more gratitude. But he did then go on to say that it was a noble fight, and they have the Ukraine, the United Kingdom's full support this war in Ukraine. But certainly I don't think Defence Secretary Ben Wallace making a huge number of Ukrainian friends today with those comments.
Let's just park the theatre of war in Europe for a moment, because Jens Stoltenberg has also been meeting the Japanese Prime Minister to discuss further engagement in the Asia-Pacific region.
Yeah, we've heard a lot from Jens Stoltenberg and NATO more generally about how security is now a global issue. It's not regional. He repeated those comments talking to his Japanese counterpart. He said that no other partner is closer to NATO than Japan. He said what happens in Asia matters for Europe and vice versa. He thanked Japan for their support of Ukraine. He went on to say he was concerned about China's heavy military build-up, both NATO and Japan concerned about that. They also condemned North Korea and their intercontinental ballistic missile program as well. So yes, NATO not just talking to their other NATO members here, they are talking to a broader coalition of countries they believe are like-minded, and NATO always saying that they are not looking to provoke a conflict. They are always looking to promote peace, but at the same time making sure that their allies are well defended.
John, thank you for that. Our correspondent John Beaver in Vilnius. Well, Beijing has criticised a NATO communique which brands China as a major challenge to its interests and security. China also signalled opposition to any NATO expansion to the Asia-Pacific region. Its foreign ministry saying it has the best record on peace and security among major countries.
We had never invaded other countries, never engaged in proxy wars, nor have we conducted military operations around the globe. China has not threatened other countries with force, nor have we exported our own ideology and interfered in other countries' internal affairs. China does not form or participate in military blocs, and China declared through legal forms that we will not solve problems by force. So why does China pose a systematic challenge to NATO?
The Kremlin has warned that the security assurances the West is considering for Ukraine would be a dangerous mistake, saying it would encroach on Russia's own security and expose Europe to greater risks for years ahead. Let's talk to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, what more did the Kremlin have to say?
Well, indeed, we have heard a very strong reaction coming from the Russian capital towards the idea of providing Ukraine with security guarantees. According to the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, the decision is erroneous and fraught with potentially very dangerous consequences, because this decision will be violating the principle of the indivisibility of security. And Moscow has been stressing that by providing security guarantees to Ukraine, the security of the Russian Federation will be infringed on, and certainly this will be fraught with consequences. Moscow says the consequences will be seen not just in the long run or in the medium run, but also in the short term, and Moscow will be making its own decisions based on those security guarantees that will be provided to Ukraine. So certainly Moscow is worrying of the potentially grave consequences should this decision actually be coming into force. And Moscow has been concluding that the NATO alliance is the alliance that is bringing aggression to the world and is creating instability instead of creating stability as it was envisaged. So certainly Moscow is warning of the destruction of the security architecture in Europe, saying that Europe will become a far more dangerous place after those guarantees are provided.
Russia's foreign minister has been talking ahead of the East Asia Summit, an ASEAN regional forum in Indonesia.
Well, that's right. We have seen Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on this trip having several meetings. One of those meetings has been taking place with the Secretary General of the ASEAN, of this organization, in which they have been discussing the prospects of beefing up the cooperation and the contacts between ASEAN and the Eurasian Economic Union, as well as the ASEAN countries. That's according to the Russian Foreign Minister. They have also been talking about the tighter cooperation between Russia and ASEAN, as well as beefing up the strategic partnership on this direction, particularly in the area of innovation and high technology. And another meeting that the Russian media have been talking about, and that's according to the Russian Foreign Minister, that has taken place is between the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as well as his Indonesian counterpart and the Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi, where the sides have been talking about their trilateral cooperation to provide food and energy security in the context where these issues are being in parallel.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Well, Ukraine's military says Russia has launched a wave of airstrikes across the country for a second night in a row. The capital, Kyiv, came under fire in the early hours of Wednesday from Moscow-backed Iranian drones. Let's take you to Ukraine now and talk to our correspondent in Kyiv, Stephanie Freed. Stephanie, this comes after Iranian drones were intercepted, I think, in a similar attack yesterday. Are we seeing some kind of new pattern here from Russian forces?
Well, Jamie, I mean, it's an ongoing pattern. And like you said, yes, 15 launched overnight. Last night, Ukraine says they intercepted 11 of those. And as you noted, the night before, 28 launched, 26 of those intercepted. The pattern started months ago. And yes, it is one aspect or angle of this campaign, of the conflict between the two sides. That's the usage of the drones in urban areas, in some of the country's cities. What the military analysts say about these kamikaze or Iranian-produced made drones is that they are primitive, they're cheap, they fly at a very low altitude, which makes them difficult. They fly somewhat, let's say, under the radar, to use that term, difficult to detect. But as time goes along, Ukraine has gotten better at learning how to detect them. And so we're seeing the results in terms of the interceptions. But, you know, when we say primitive and slow, reports are that Ukrainians shoot them out of the sky with AK-47s. At the same time, not to make light of the fact that they can and do cause damage, claim lives. But yes, drone, this has been reported, this conflict, from the start. We will be seeing drones. That's what we're seeing.
Stephanie, I don't know if you managed to hear our earlier interview from the NATO summit, but clearly President Zelensky returning home there with more weapons, yes, but no closer to NATO membership. I wonder what the reaction is going to be to that where you are.
Well, I can say leading up to the NATO summit, there weren't high hopes. I mean, Ukrainians understood that there are certain, like, there's a certain ceiling in terms of what the parameters are for inviting Ukraine to NATO, and they understood that that really wasn't likely that was going to happen. So there's frustration, the frustration also of no timeline being given over, okay, when will the invitation be forthcoming? At the same time, as you talked about the weapons packages, I mean, that is certainly received with gratitude, and that's something that not only the President Zelensky has been talking about for a while, and he's been talking about it a lot. Certainly the people that we're seeing out there in the field, the military personnel, are also talking about needing more weapons, needing more ammunition. So that's a positive. Jamie.
Stephanie, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stephanie Freed in Ukraine. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the intense rainfall battering India, causing death and destruction as floods and landslides devastate communities.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel and connect. How we think, interact and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. More weapons, more support. NATO offers concrete security assurances to Ukraine, but no precise timeline to membership. Our other headlines: China accuses NATO of stirring up tension in Asia and warns the military alliance against expansion in the region. Thailand's electoral authority has asked the Constitutional Court to disqualify Peter Limjaroenrat a day before a crucial vote on who will be the country's next Prime Minister. He's the leader of the youth-led progressive Move Forward party, which won the most seats in the recent general election. Peter has the backing of 8 parties in an alliance seeking to form a new government. But he's faced opposition over his plans to reform Thailand's royal laws. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Chawarat Yongjiranong, who joins us from Bangkok. I guess, first of all, explain to us who are not familiar with the story, what has the Electoral Commission accused Peter of?
Well, it definitely has been in the play for about some days, but nobody actually expected that it would be happening today, and that is the Election Commission filing these 2 cases towards the Constitutional Court. There are 2 issues that they have brought out. The first is that they accuse Kun Pitha of having media shares of ITV, which is a former media company, and this could have an impact on his standing as an MP, as it is not allowed for any MPs or a PM, for that matter of fact, to have any shares in a media company. And another issue, which you've just teased a little bit earlier before I came on air, is that there's accusations that the Move Forward party is attempting to overthrow the democratic system with His Majesty the King as head of state. Now, this is based on the party's declaration to amend the section 112 of the criminal court, which is, or code rather, which is that of the lèse-majesté law. If it is accused of this case and it found guilty, that could result in the dissolution of the party. So far, the EC has recommended that Pitha be stripped of his MP status, despite him saying that he does not have any shares of the ITV company so far. But all in all, though, it doesn't mean that he cannot stand for a PM election tomorrow, as the parliament is going to hold its house for the very first time since the election took place here in the country. But definitely things to note that has been brought up by the Move Forward party as well as its supporters is that the timing of this is just the eve of the day where they're going to vote for the PM position. It took only 32 days for the EC to investigate his case. Normally, it could range between 355 days to 75 days. And also, normally the charter does not accept petitions from individuals, preferring that they be sent by state agencies instead. And in this case, it was done by individuals. So far, the Move Forward party says that they are going to try to file a complaint against the EC for not allowing Kun Pitha to defend himself in the EC hearing. And also right now, he has been ongoing with his media tour with various media channels, trying to get to the people. And apparently now we are seeing that there is a response. Already there are protests on the streets here in Bangkok, and expected to be more tomorrow, as there are now reinforcements reported coming from the government side to try and hold everyone away from the parliament.
We shall no doubt talk to you in the coming hours. For the moment, our correspondent Chawarat Yongjiranong in Bangkok. Thank you very much. Weeks of intense rain in North India have killed at least 72 people and caused widespread damage and destruction. Floods and landslides have destroyed bridges, washed away roads and left many homes buried under mud. Most of the damage is in the state of Himachal Pradesh, where a month's rain fell in a single day. In Spain, it's heat causing the problems. The country is enduring its second heat wave of the season, with 34 provinces on alert as temperatures soar above 44 degrees. A protocol banning certain outdoor work is in force in some places. 2 workers have died from heat stroke this year. And it's the same story in the southern United States, where extreme heat is gripping states from Florida to Arizona. A heat advisory is in place in Florida until Wednesday night amid record-breaking temperatures. Some local weather forecasters have been describing this as a climate catastrophe. Well, hundreds of wildfires continue to rage across Canada, many of them still out of control. Record temperatures across the country are making it much harder to extinguish the fires. Our correspondent Dan Williams reports.
The effects of Canada's wildfires continues to have severe impacts across much of North America. Here in Chicago, the air quality is predicted to be poor for at least the rest of the week. More than 800 wildfires still burning across Canada, the majority of which are out of control. More than 9 million hectares have burned so far this year in Canada, according to the Canadian Interagency Fire Centre, making it the worst wildfire season on record. Across Canada, extreme heat alerts remain in place. In the Northwest Territories on Saturday, temperatures soared as high as 100 degrees, or nearly 38 degrees Celsius, the hottest temperature ever recorded in that northernmost area. New rounds of evacuations were also ordered over the weekend in British Columbia. The region's largest wildfire on record, the Donny Creek Fire in British Columbia, is approaching 600,000 hectares. Firefighters discovered it on May 12th. And then there are those impacts that are being felt across North America. Poor and sometimes dangerous air quality, which is particularly impactful on vulnerable people. Children, pregnant women, seniors, outdoor workers and individuals with pre-existing health conditions. And with hundreds of wildfires still burning out of control and with months of the summer still to go, this cycle is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has fired a suspected intercontinental ballistic missile off its coast. It reportedly flew for 74 minutes. That's the longest flight time ever recorded for a missile launched by Pyongyang. It was criticized by Japan and South Korea, which is set to discuss DPRK threats at the NATO summit. Pyongyang had earlier threatened retaliation for an alleged airspace violation by the United States. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has paid a visit to the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank a week after an Israeli raid which killed 12 Palestinians and 1 Israeli soldier. It's the first visit by Abbas since 2005. Israel's military operation involved hundreds of troops, as well as drone strikes and bulldozers tearing up the streets and damaging houses. Discriminatory behaviour at all levels of British football hit a record high last year, according to a new report. The charity Kick It Out says there was a 65% rise in reported incidents compared to the previous season, although it acknowledged that it could be due to greater awareness among fans and players. Racism accounted for nearly half of all incidents, while allegations of sexism and misogyny rose by 400%. The population of the United States is becoming more ethnically diverse, but aging fast. That's according to new research. CGTN's correspondent Jim Spellman has the story.
The U.S. population is getting older. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the median age for a U.S. resident rose to 38.9 years old. No states are seeing their populations get younger. As the country gets older, it is also getting more racially and ethnically diverse.
Part of that has to do with the aging of the white population. It's much older than all the other groups, so that there are more deaths and fewer births. In fact, right now, there's what's called a natural decrease, more deaths than births in the white population. And that'll probably continue.
The graying of America is expected to stress government programs like Social Security and Medicare and place pressure on services aimed at helping older people as they age.
We need long-term care transformation. We need more choices. We need more ability to have care at home. We need nursing homes that have more private rooms as opposed to even 3 or 4 in a room.
White Americans are aging and having fewer children as racial and ethnic minorities, who are generally younger, have more children. And every year, the U.S. population is boosted by largely non-white immigrants. Census data finds the white population to be falling slowly, the black population rising slightly, while those of Asian or Hispanic origin grew at a faster rate.
America is going to be much more racially diverse, especially among the younger population. Millennials, Gen Zers, post-Gen Zers. They're going to be leading the way. And the sooner we come to understand this, the better off we're going to be, I think.
For now, older, largely white generations of Americans continue to hold plenty of power.
I get that age is a completely reasonable issue.
But demographers say in the coming decades, we can expect to see younger, more diverse generations rise to positions of power in politics, business, and culture. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
China has been giving details of its plan to send humans to the moon by the year 2030. The mission will involve 2 rockets, one carrying the lunar lander, the other transporting the crew. This all comes as China celebrated the world's first successful launch into orbit of a methane-powered rocket. Our correspondent Jung Yibing reports.
China's Zhuxue 2 has become the world's first rocket using methalox as propellant to successfully fly into orbit, marking a major breakthrough in cutting-edge technology previously dominated by the U.S. SpaceX and Blue Origin. Codenamed Zhuxue 2Y2, the rocket is a second in the series, and it was launched from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the Gobi Desert, northwestern China. The success of this mission has verified the various gains of this rocket and laid a solid foundation for the development of the reusable rockets in next stage, according to its developer, Landspace, a Chinese private space launch provider. The rocket uses liquid methane as a fuel and liquid oxygen as an oxidizer. They are reusable, non-toxic, and powerful, and central to the reusable rockets. The carrier rocket has a 2-stage configuration, a diameter of 3.35 meters, a height of 49.5 meters, a takeoff weight of 219 tons, and takeoff thrust of 268 tons. This is the second test flight of the Zhuxue 2 after the failure of this first in December last year. The current mission took a number of improvement measures and verified their effectiveness through simulation, ground tests, and engine tests. Everyone at the site is so excited and happy today. Landspace said, after success of the test flight, they will further optimize the rocket, accumulate experiences for the reliability and safety, and lay the foundation to provide low-cost and high-performance products for the market. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, in Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center.
The headlines again. More weapons, more support. NATO offers concrete security assurances to Ukraine, but no precise timeline to membership. Our other headlines. China accuses NATO of stirring up tension in Asia and warns the alliance against expansion in the region. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.